everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Always delighted to join someone with an impressive shelfie. Mine, of course, is not real. It's just a digital thing, but glad to be talking with author, creator, Brian Fies. Brian, thank you for jumping in, joining, and talking with me.
Oh, very happy to be here. I like your podcast a lot, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. I enjoy your work a great deal, so glad to feature you. And I'll mention a couple of titles. What Happened to the World of Tomorrow? Great,
Hmm.
great question. Uh, The Last Mechanical Monster being one of those as well.
That is
And A
one of mine.
Fire Story.
Right, right.
Yes.
And my first graphic novel was a book called Mom's Cancer, which is also a work of nonfiction similar to a fire story.
Yes. And it has been, if I'm not mistaken, it's been translated into a couple of different languages. Is that
I
right?
eight, I think.
Yeah.
Some you'd expect. Yeah, it's translated into French and Italian, I think, but I believe it's been translated into Croatian, which was a real kind of kick in the pants. The
Nice.
Portuguese edition is interesting because they redesigned the cover and it's bright pink and it's just I never would have done it, but it sure looks great. So,
There you go. There you
but yeah,
go.
that the Mom's Cancer in particular, it's the first book I did, and it's still in print. It's been almost 20 years. It's still in print. It's taught in medical schools.
Mm.
It's sort of one of the foundational texts of what's called graphic medicine, which is the idea of comics and healthcare kind of coming together and complementing each other, working together to some interesting ends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very proud of that book.
Well, and to be at the forefront of some of those connections between comics and medicine must be rewarding in its own right, because I know there's an entire journal now called Graphic Medicine, I believe.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
There are international conferences. Every year they have an international conference. I helped organize the first several of them, but in Europe or North America, they alternate. And this summer is going to be in Ireland, which I won't be at, but I love them. And this is something that didn't exist when I did Mom's Cancer. The first graphic medicine conference was in 2010 in London, and they
Mm.
invited me to come speak to it. And I said, "Oh, I've never been to London, so I'll do that." And it's just this whole subdivision, this whole field of medical humanities that the idea is, in particular use of my book, is teach or show these up and coming doctors how their patients are going to view them, what kind of
Mhm.
relationships you're going to have with your patients, see it from the other side. And I think that's what comics do best. You didn't mention I'm a graphic novelist. I make comic books or cartoons or what have you, but
Mhm. Mhm.
which I know is what many of your subjects do. But I think that's one thing graphic novels do best is encourage that empathy.
Yeah.
It's so easy to put yourself in the character's shoes, and more than any other medium, I think.
I'm never sure. That should be something that I ask at the beginning of these. What verbal would you like to use? Because I said author and creator, but graphic novelist, absolutely. That encompasses a lot because you're doing the drawing, the writing, several steps in the creation process.
Yeah, I actually had a recent online discussion that was interesting among um, me and some friends, cartoonists, and some of them are a little, I don't know if the words, they're wary of calling themselves cartoonists. They don't know if they're writers or cartoonists. And I've been a writer before, a prose writer, text writer. I was a newspaper reporter and a freelance journalist and a science journalist for a while, where I just wrote with words.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to me, it feels like the same thing. You're trying to do the same thing with words or with words and pictures. You're trying to deliver information as clearly and economically as you can.
Hmm.
And so I don't mind the label cartoonist. I'm very proud to finally at this point in my life be able to say I've achieved being a cartoonist, but I think of myself as a writer. And sometimes I write with words and sometimes I write with words plus pictures. And it all feels the same in my head. It's all the same problem solving and organization. It's just sometimes you have to draw it instead of type it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was the initial connection to storytelling and writing for you? How did that come to be?
It's ancient history. It's I was thinking about this in preparation for this podcast. Some of my very earliest memories, and it must be age 2 or 3, is just being fascinated, hypnotized by things like rotating neon signs and animated logos on TV that would swoosh across the screen. Somehow this combination of words and pictures just always grasped me.
Hmm.
And so, comics taught me how to read newspaper comics, superhero comics, all the comics, made me a reader. It didn't make me a good pronouncer. I thought the word origin was pronounced Oregon for a long time, and I
Hmm.
couldn't figure
Hmm.
out why they named a state after it. But, I was a confused child. But something about this combination of words and pictures just really clicks with my brain. And it clicks with a lot of readers' brains too, I think. You know, there's a um, there's a quote by cartoonist Larry Gonick who said something like, "We don't remember things as movies or TV shows. We remember them as cartoons." And I think that's right. I think brains work in cartooning terms, by which I mean when you think back to some really important event in your life, like a marriage or a death or something really important, you don't remember it in photographic detail.
Hmm.
You don't remember a videotape of the thing. You don't remember what color the curtains are or what the painting on the wall was. Um, you remember who was there, and you remember more or less what was said, but not an exact record of it. And you
Hmm.
remember how it made you feel in that event. And that's a cartoon. That's a cartoon. That's reality distilled to its essence. And so I approach cartooning like that is start with reality and then just pare and sand and rub down until you get this little nugget, this little gem that says exactly what you want to say and
Hmm.
exactly how you want to say it. And that's my ideal cartoon, which I rarely achieve.
Very well said. Very well said. As far as from the creating perspective, you mentioned using words only. What do comics and the visuals allow you to achieve and to get to?
Well, that's a great question. The cliche is a picture's worth a thousand words. But uh, comics excel at things like symbolism and metaphor.
Hmm.
You don't have to say something is like something else. You can just draw it as that thing. You don't have to say an actor's a ham. You can draw him as a ham if you wanted to. Um, when I'm writing, uh, drafting a graphic novel, very often I'll work words first. I'll script it out, and it looks like a teleplay or like a theatrical play. It's mostly dialogue with some description of action and place and so forth. And I'll
Hmm.
draw little cartoons in the side. And then after I've written it, I'll always go through and I'll look for opportunities to cross out words and say, I could do this better with a picture. And in my mind, the platonic ideal I'm sort of shooting for is I want a comic to be half words, half text, and half images, and neither makes complete sense without the other.
Hmm.
You're relying on the reader to kind of knit the words and pictures together to extract the meaning from them. And then you got them. Then the reader's part of the story. They're part of the storytelling process, you know. And that's when
Yeah.
it starts to feel like telepathy. That's when the reader's kind of putting these words and pictures that maybe don't have anything to do with each other, except they have to figure out what they have to do with each other. And then they're solving a little puzzle. You get the little pleasure centers of the brain popping. And when it works right, it's very rewarding for both the person telling the story and the person reading it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And as you're talking about that, I'm just thinking about when people tend to read comics for the first time, when I work with students that read comics for the first time, sometimes they only read the words and then they get
Yeah,
to the end and go, what was that? So that's a perfect example, what you just said, of words and images, they have to work together.
I've had people ask me, how do you read a comic? They don't know. They don't. Do you read the words first? Do you look at the pictures first? And
Hmm.
I don't know how to answer that. I've been reading them my whole life. You take them in simultaneously, but how do you do that? I don't know. I've been practicing a long time,
Yeah,
but
same, same. Since childhood. Absolutely.
yeah.
Uh, you mentioned graphic medicine, of course. How do you decide on the themes, the creative direction that you want to go in?
Well, some of the stories come to me, and some of them I come up with. Mom's cancer and a fire story were things that just happened to me. These are
Hmm.
nonfiction graphic novels about my mother's diagnosed treatment for lung cancer and me losing my house in the wildfires of Northern California in 2017. I was one of 6,000 people who got burned out in one night. And so, those just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it turns out that the way I kind of handle trauma is I write and draw about it.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, that just seems to be how I process things. I don't think it's healthy, but it it works. And lets other people share in the story, and I empathize with them and they empathize with me. And a lot of people have been through similar things, and it's kind of a wonderful thing. My other books, Whatever Happened in the World of Tomorrow and Last Mechanical Monster, um, it's a commitment when you sit down to write a graphic novel. You got to love what you're writing about because you're going to be stuck with it for 2 or 3 years. People don't
Hmm.
understand how long it takes to draw a 200-page comic book, write and draw and color and letter and do all the other stuff if you do that all yourself, as I do. Um, so you got to love your topic. And for me, sort of my filter is I want to write books that I want to read and I haven't found anywhere yet.
Hmm.
And I want to write books that no one on earth but me could do. That's
Yeah.
the little island I want to plant my flag on. And if other people want to come swim out to my island and join me there and help me wave my flag, that's wonderful. But mostly I'm just doing it because if somebody else could tell the story better, they should tell it. I'm not the person to tell that story. You go tell that story. And particularly with young people, I get once in a while some young person will bring around a comic or a mini comic or a portfolio or something for me to review. And so many of them are some are astonishing, but so many are derivative. It's, 7 lovable characters bumbling through a forest on a quest with a magic sword and a dragon.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's okay. Well, we've all read Lord of the Rings. Thank you. That was fun. But what about you? What's the story you want to tell? What do you bring that nobody else on the planet can bring to storytelling? The example I like to give is, if you really have a passion for collecting bottle caps, and you're the world's expert on bottle caps, and you can explain the difference between a 1954 and a 1957 Coke bottle cap. And if you can write something that makes me care as much about bottle caps as you care about bottle caps, I will be your friend for life
Hmm.
because you
Hmm.
brought your passion to it and you've conveyed that passion. You've made somebody else feel that passion. And I want to be in that audience. I'd rather read the bottle cap book than the, 6 characters on a quest book because
Yeah.
I've already read that one.
And it's a good one. It is a good one. But yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. Um, you mentioned when we first started recording, actually just before, that you know someone that I know named Lucas Turnblum.
I think very highly of Lucas. He's a wonderful person and having some success, and he deserves all of it and more.
Yeah, yeah. Any other collaborators, friends, folks that have supported you along the way that you'd like to give a quick shout out to before we get to the final official question?
Oh gosh, I appreciate that. I live in Northern California, north of San Francisco, a town called Santa Rosa, where Charles Schultz worked and lived.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I know a fair number of people who worked or still work in his studio. His studio still exists and produces Peanuts material and so forth. So there are some local people, cartoonists named Lex Fajardo and
I was gonna say
Paige
Lex
Braddock.
Fajardo works for them. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Justin Thompson is up here. And they're just friends who are fun to get together with, have a beer and a snack with. Um, uh, Pearls Before Swine cartoonist Stefan Pastis has been a good friend. He's local here. But then I've just met the most amazing people through cartooning and comics. And what I really enjoy, the first hero of mine I ever met was Gene Colan, a comic book artist named Gene Colan.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
actually, I won an Eisner Award for Mom's Cancer in 2005, 2006, and so had Gene. Gene had won an Eisner Award that year. And so we're sitting together on the little bleachers while I take your picture. And Gene and I just fell in this conversation. And he had no idea who I was, and he shouldn't have. There was no reason for him to know who I was. But we just had the best conversation where he talked to me and treated me like a peer,
Hmm. Hmm.
like a fellow ink slinger. And that touched me so deeply and meant so much to me that this man I'd grown up reading his comic books was treating me like an equal when I clearly wasn't. Uh, really touched me, and I try to keep that in mind. And I found that the most successful, most secure creators have that in common. Is they it costs them nothing to lift up a new kid.
Yeah.
You know, there
Yeah.
are other people who are jealous and petty and vengeful and spiteful, and not many in comics, but there's a few. But the people who are at the top of the game who have nothing to prove to anybody are usually very interested in being kind and helping lift other people up, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's the sense that I've gotten from a lot of folks that have been kind enough to be on this show. So glad to hear that that's been a good part of your experience too.
Yeah, it's a nice field, it's just kind people. Cartoonists, I don't mean to, stereotype, but maybe they weren't the most popular kids in class.
Mhm,
Maybe they
mhm,
were sitting in the back doodling in the margins of their notebooks.
mhm.
And it's a very solitary profession. Unless you're in an animation studio or something, you're kind of working by yourself in a spare bedroom, and you work for 2 years, then you put it out and hope somebody reads it. And so any opportunity I have just to get together and just talk shop with people who've done the same thing and find out, well, how do you do it? Here's how I do it. Oh, really? You're all digital now. I didn't know that. And just have those shop talk conversations is really just a joy for me.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Well, and congratulations on the Eisner as well, from way back. I love the irony of saying that you're not an equal creator, but you're sitting there with an Eisner. So uh,
Yeah.
celebrating both the humanity you're expressing there as well as what you've accomplished.
Well, I appreciate that. Gene had it like a 40-year head start on me. So, you know, but
Yeah, a legend for sure. For sure.
yeah, yeah. But everybody, all the famous people I've met, all the great famous people I've met have been like that. Al Jaffe was like that with me. Just through my editor, Charlie Kochman at Abrams, I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of heroes of mine. Jerry Robinson, who co-created Batman and
Mm.
most of his Rogues Gallery. I had a nice conversation with him once, and if I start, I don't want to start name dropping because then I'll leave somebody out and there'll be
I
hurt feelings.
understand.
But yeah, it's a neat profession with neat people, and I really enjoy meeting the cool ones.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I have one more question and maybe a sub question. So, curious about what you're working on now. What has your creative vision, and where people can go and find out more about what you're creating?
I appreciate that.
Hmm.
I'm working on, I have two projects outstanding, and I don't think I can tell you about either of them.
Very exciting.
One,
Very
one
exciting.
is one is very small. It took me a very short amount of time to do, and it was just a delight. It was a bucket list thing for me. Just fun, flat out fun. And I think I'll be able to talk about that maybe in a month or two or three. Um, but it was a neat reminder that after you do a book about your house burning down, to remind yourself that yes, comics can be serious and adult and nonfiction, but sometimes they ought to just be fun. And I just
Hmm.
had so much fun
Hmm.
doing this little project. And my other project is a big one. It's graphic novel sized and complexity. It's in a format I don't think I've ever seen anybody attempt before. So it's kind of a little high wire act, a little bit of a challenge. And it's a
Nice.
love story. And that's all I'll say about that. It's a love story.
Love
So,
that.
um, again, hopefully I can say more about that. I don't have a contract for that one yet. So I'm very skittish about talking up work and when I don't have a contract because then it doesn't happen. And then you have to say, hey, whatever happened to that thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, sending the good vibes for a contract to come soon.
yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. And the places people can connect, if there are websites, social media spaces. Um,
Yeah, I'm on Facebook as Brian Fies. I think I'm the only Brian Fies on the entire planet. So Fies is Fies. And then I actually still maintain a blog at brianfies.blogspot.com. So again, if you Google Brian Fies, you'll find me because I literally think I'm the only one.
nice, nice. One of a kind, very unique. And my last question is anything you'd like to share with us about your creative process, Brian? Anything that you'd like to mention or show
Yeah.
us that you might have?
Well, we've kind of delved into it a little bit before. I really look at everything I do as a matter of writing and of problem solving and creating little puzzles and problems for the reader to discover. But thank you. I would say that in terms of cartooning, I am a cartooning dinosaur. I still draw with ink on paper, which is increasingly rare. A lot of people just do nothing but digital. I draw with ink on paper, then I scan it into Photoshop and do coloring and lettering and so forth in there. But yeah, we talked. I did mention, I did a book called I'm sorry, this is The Last Mechanical Monster, and I did a watercolor for the cover of that that
Oh,
looks something like that. And you can see, I'll show you, I'll try not to get any glare on it, but the before and after is that watercolor became this cover.
yeah,
So,
very
you can
nice.
see the transformation there, what had to happen to make that happen. But I just love, this is some 2 point perspective I did for Last Mechanical Monster. And I just love this kind of thing. I was doing this stuff when I was like 12 years old. I could fill up an entire, notebook full of just, and it's dead easy if you know how to do it, but it looks impressive as heck on the
Hmm.
page, especially when you light up all the skyscrapers and such. So but this is all ink on paper. And I just love that. People ask, well, why don't you go digital? Because it's quicker and easier and you have an undo button and there you go. And for me, sitting at the drawing board, drawing things like that is when you fall into the Zen state or I don't know, the different waves are going in your head and time passes in an instant and you kind of blink your eyes open and say, wow, how did that get there? I don't remember doing that, but it sure is nice.
Hmm.
I've never once had that experience sitting at a computer. Never
Yeah.
once. So for me, the fun of the job is putting ink or watercolor or something on paper and sort of communing with a medium like that and in that way. And somebody told me, well, you got to go digital, Brian, because it's the 21st century and you can't draw anymore. You've got to do it on a tablet or a screen or something. I don't think I'd want to do it because that's the fun part, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
But
that's that's the art of it to me.
but that's the beauty of it too, is there are these different approaches, and I love the look of watercolor in comics. It's just there's
Yeah.
something unique about it.
Yeah, there really is. There really is. Which is not to denigrate the work of my friends who do digital, and they have many reasons for it. And some of them just do astonishing, wonderful, beautiful work digitally. I can't. And I prefer not to. So that's my choice. But I don't disrespect theirs. There's no argument here. Whatever works for you works, and you just whatever you need to do to tell the story, you do that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, I greatly appreciate the time, greatly appreciate the work. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to include for listeners before we close out?
No, I don't think so. But thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always I was talking before. It's fun to talk shop, and I get very excited about this. You might be able to tell I get a little amped up, and because my family doesn't care. My wife
Well,
loves me, but we don't talk shop.
I get that. I totally get that. Glad to talk with you anytime, as you're working on projects, as your new projects are coming to be and entering different stages. Glad to have you back to talk about the next steps.
Oh, thanks very much. I'll take you up on that.
All right, sounds great. Thank you.